Well, let's get more on the dramatic news this morning of the arrest of Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell. He was taken into police custody this morning to be questioned about the funding and finances of the Scottish National Party. Their house in Glasgow has been sealed off, and outside the front door there's a police evidence tent. Until he quit last month, Peter Murrell was chief executive of the SNP and had been for more than 20 years. The new SNP leader, First Minister Humza Yousaf, said he was unaware of the arrest until after it had taken place.
My reaction, as you'd imagine, much like anybody involved in the SNP, is that this is a difficult day for the party. But again, I just reiterate and emphasise it's so important for me not to comment on a live police investigation and be seen to prejudice that in any way, shape or form.
Our Scotland correspondent is James Shaw. And James, tell us what happened this morning.
Well, as far as we know, as you've said, Sarah, Peter Murrell was arrested, and he certainly was being questioned by the police. That's what they said in their statement earlier on this morning. And then what we've seen of the police presence outside the married home of Peter Murrell and Nicola Sturgeon, just outside Glasgow in Uddingston. The curtains, the blinds drawn, but a big police presence, 10 officers outside the house, and also outside the headquarters of the SNP, and officers inside that building as well. So clearly a very thorough investigation going on at the moment, and an important development in the police investigation into the finances of the SNP, which has been going on for about 18 months. And that centres really on complaints that were raised about what had happened to more than £600,000 raised by activists for the SNP to campaign for a second independence referendum. Questions about what had happened to that, how that money had been managed. So clearly this is a very important and really extraordinary development in that investigation.
And as you say, James, it has been going on, rumbling on for some considerable time.
Well, it has. These concerns were raised some time ago. In fact, the police investigation really started in 2021. But the amounts of money that we're talking about were raised between 2017 and 2020, a total of £667,000. We also know that Peter Murrell lent £107,000 to the party in 2021. That was being paid back. But at the end of 2019, the total amount of money in the SNP's bank account was only £97,000. So clearly there are kind of discrepancies, questions about what has happened to that money. I think the line from the SNP has always been that that equivalent of money, the equivalent of that more than £600,000, would be spent on campaigning for a second independence referendum. But clearly there is no prospect at the moment of that happening, and therefore there is no active campaign for a second independence right now.
James Shaw, thanks very much. Well, with Nicola Sturgeon as SNP leader and her husband Peter Murrell as the chief executive, they were Scotland's power couple. On the day she announced her resignation, she paid tribute to her husband and her family.
Few people understand the price families of politicians pay for the jobs we choose to do. Mine have been my rock throughout.
Well, today her successor, Humza Yousaf, was asked if he thought that the allegations against Peter Murrell were the real reason that she resigned.
No, I believe Nicola Sturgeon absolutely that she had taken the party as further forward as she possibly could. I think anybody who has particularly seen Nicola through the COVID pandemic could really sympathise with just how exhausted she absolutely was.
This morning I spoke to Jim Sillars, who was deputy leader of the SNP under Alex Salmond, and also to Alistair Grant, political editor of The Scotsman. I asked Alistair about Peter Murrell's role in the party.
Peter Murrell is one of the huge figures in Scottish politics, albeit he probably didn't have much of a public profile until recent years, really. He's been chief executive of the SNP since 1999. He is Nicola Sturgeon's husband. He's probably one of the figures credited with the SNP's electoral success in recent years in Scotland. And obviously through his relationship with Nicola Sturgeon, they're seen as probably the kind of primary power couple in Scotland. The people responsible for taking the SNP to where it is now. I think in recent years, he's probably had more of a public profile on the back of the Holyrood inquiry into the Alex Salmond affair. He gave evidence to that committee. And I think that was one of the rare times where he's had a kind of faced questions in front of a committee, in front of camera. Probably came into the public consciousness a little bit more at that time.
And these, of course, there were allegations against Alex Salmond, which were fought out in public, which ultimately he was cleared.
Ultimately, he was cleared. And it was obviously a kind of ongoing saga in Scottish politics, and this was a Holyrood inquiry into how the Scottish government handled some of those initial allegations.
Jim, of course, you, when you were deputy leader, you worked with him. What's he like?
He's basically a very good organiser. I mean, he actually started his life in the party as the chief aide to Alec Salmond when Alec became MP for Banff and Buchan way back. So Peter's been in the party a long time, very good reputation as an organiser. The problem in recent years is that he has been allowed to exercise total control of the party for Nicola as the leader. Basically, he's made sure that there's been no dissent within and marginalised any who dared speak out in public.
Alistair Grant, it's such an unusual setup where you have somebody, until recently, of course, both of them leaving so soon after each other. But to have the leader of the party and then the person running it in this power couple.
It's an extremely unusual situation, and it's fair to say there have been concerns raised about it for some time, just having that level of power concentrated in two people, a husband and wife team. I think I'm right in saying that Alex Salmond actually raised concerns about this back when Nicola Sturgeon became leader of the SNP, became First Minister, and basically said that it was a kind of unsustainable situation. And there have been ongoing concerns about things around transparency, around how SNP HQ deals with things. So it is an extremely unusual situation, and it has been for a number of years in Scottish politics.
And what we're seeing now, do we think in any way it is connected, perhaps responsible for Nicola Sturgeon's decision to stand down? Jim?
Well, I don't know. Scotland's been awash with rumours ever since Nicola decided to stand down. And, I'm one of the ones who say, I don't know. And I think that's the only honest answer you can give. Alistair
Grant.
I think I'd echo that. I really don't know either. I think certainly Nicola Sturgeon hasn't raised this herself. I think she was asked about the ongoing police investigation directly when she gave her resignation speech, and I think kind of dismissed it at the time. She's also been doing a number of media since then, including a BBC podcast. It certainly doesn't seem like there was fears of something like this on the horizon, but I really don't know.
Jim, can I ask you to just take us back to the point at which he was building the party, because he was obviously in that position for a very long time. What do you remember from him then?
Well, as I say, Peter was a very good organiser. There's no question about that whatsoever. But he was also very fortunate. I mean, in 2014 referendum, the independence movement, and particularly the Scottish National Party, lost the numerical vote, but actually won politically, because so many people had become committed to independence that as soon as you went to an election and you could bring in 45% in your favour in a first-past-the-post system, you were going to win big. So I don't in any way take away from Peter his organisational ability, but almost you could say a child would have won those elections. They were there. The SNP could not be beaten.
Well, Alistair, when you think about where the SNP was only a few months ago, they lost, obviously, their leader, Nicola Sturgeon. They've had a difficult election race to replace her. And then now we have today's news about Peter Murrell. Do you think it will have an effect on the fortunes of the SNP and independence?
I think undoubtedly these things will have an effect on the party. As you say, there's been a number of things just stacking up now. The resignation of Nicola Sturgeon, we had an extremely divisive and bruising leadership contest that I think probably took a lot of SNP members by surprise, just how personal some of it got. I think on independence, I think it probably will. Again, you could argue it would have an impact. I think Scotland is a divided country on independence, so I'm not sure people's constitutional views will change much on the back of things like this.
Jim Sillars, given all that the SNP has seen this year with the loss of Nicola Sturgeon and the vote, the battle to replace her, and now this, will it affect the push for independence?
I think the 44-45 will remain in favour of independence, but they may not now see the Scottish National Party as the main instrument for gaining that independence. I think from a party point of view, we are in for a very difficult period.
Jim Sillars there and Alistair Grant. Coming up on the programme.
It felt for me